Welcome all to this orange room to talk about mythology today, to talk about the TU Delft today, to talk about technology. I am here because I'm just a great fan of mythology and I know what its power is, I know how important stories are, but I'm actually very curious why you guys are here. What made you sign up for this on a rainy Tuesday afternoon?
Me first. Okay, perfect. Well, I actually just started working here in the academic heritage team, so we're all about the TU Delft story and how we tell that. So I was very interested.
And did you already know about the flame, which is our main character of tonight?
Oh yes, I was grilled on that with the new employee introduction thing. I had to answer a lot of very specific questions.
Okay, and anyone else who already knows about the flame of TU Delft and its logo? No one? You know it?
Yeah, about how Prometheus stole the fire from the gods.
And did you already know it before you came here?
Yeah. Yeah, in middle school in the Netherlands, some people.
And what made you come here if you already know it?
Mainly the first bit, progress through technology. I was kind of like, technology can help us progress, but I think we also need to make some changes if we want to progress and keep the planet alive or those sorts of things. I think TU Delft focuses a lot on the progress through technology, but not so much on the choices you have to make.
Okay. And who else has to say something on progress and technology? What's your story about progress?
Oh, actually, I'm doing a course which is called Deep Dive. It's about technology critique. That's why I'm here, to be honest. And my story about technology and progress, I think currently there are a lot of changes going on, a lot of technology pushes, and I was just curious to know how we perceive this and what can we do about it.
Okay, interesting. Well, me and my colleague Klaas, we went on to campus to ask everyone around here what they think about the flame that is in the TU Delft logo. Many people actually already knew that it is indeed about Prometheus, who stole the fire from the gods, but we had some interesting other things as well. So the flame, it can be stolen by a god, but it can also be ignition of all students. It can be a flame of hope. It can be the burning flame of the oil industry. And another question that pops up when you think about progress through technology, we ask people also, what is your role in society then as engineer? And this was an interesting one. Many people say, I'm just a trying fool. I'm just trying something with technology, not really know what I'm doing. But there are also some potential heroes we have here on campus. Who else is a potential hero here? Yes? What makes you a potential hero?
That I'm in it for more than money, I guess. I want to improve things
With money?
with my job, with the things that I learn here.
What do you study?
Computer science.
And which topics are you currently on?
I'm the first year.
So you're still a long way to being a hero yet. Still great to have you here. And another question we asked our people is, okay, but then what is technology actually? Is it a love potion? Is it Pandora's box? Is it a magic sword? Can it be poison? Many people think it's a Pandora's box. Do you know what that is? Who wants to respond to that? What's technology for you? What is it for you?
I'm really not sure. No, I'm sorry.
That's okay, maybe you'll learn more today. Because what we see here is actually, we can tell many, many different stories about technology. We can have the Promethean one, but we can also talk about magicians. We can talk about swords. We can do anything. So today we're going to find out what's your story, what do you want to tell, and actually also what does the TU Delft tell. And for the first part, I invited someone from Leiden University. He knows everything from mythologies all over the world, but the one of Prometheus is actually his favorite. So that's a nice coincidence. And he will today tell you everything about this myth and also about the power of myth and what it can do. So please, may I welcome with a warm applause Hugo Koning.
Thank you very much. Nieke, for your introduction. Let me just begin by saying that I'm really happy to be here. This is very far from my comfort zone because usually I'm talking to, you know, linguists, historians, and people like that. And now suddenly I'm in a room filled with engineers and all kinds of technicians. So it's wonderful to just not play at home for once. Yeah. Yeah, sure, sure. My talk is, I think, about 25 minutes or so. I'm not sure what the room is that we have, but usually when I'm talking, I'm really happy with questions on the go, actually. Yeah. Is that okay? Okay, great, great. So we're not with that many, so I think it will never be truly disruptive. And if you have a really difficult question, I'll just say, well, come to me, come see me in the break, or something, something like that. So, well, thanks for having me. That's one thing, and I'm really happy to be able to talk about mythology, which is my favorite subject. That's true, and Nienke asked me to prepare something for tonight. So tonight I want to talk about myth, and I want to talk about the myth of Prometheus in particular, because even though I just learned that you guys all know a lot about the myth of Prometheus already and Pandora's box and stuff like that, I hope that there is something that I can still teach you about it, and that there may be some ideas in there that are worth your while, and that we can pick up later during the workshop. So first of all, I could speak during this introduction on what a myth is, or what or to give you a definition of myth, but I'm not going to do that because that's far too difficult, actually. And there are many scholars who are debating the actual definition of myth, and I'm not going to go into that. If you want to know more about that, that's perfectly fine. Find me somewhere tonight, and I will discuss it with you. So it seemed to me to be more interesting to look at what myth does. So there are, as you may imagine, many answers to that particular question of what a myth does. What does a myth do? And I tried to pick for tonight just 3 functions that are, I think, for us now at the moment, most relevant. So the first one that I want to focus on just briefly is a type of myth that we have come to term a charter myth, after the work of a pretty famous anthropologist at the beginning of the 20th century who studied myth, and he coined the term of a charter myth, by which he means a myth that serves to justify something that is in present society. So it's a sort of a tale that that sort of perpetuates the daily reality. That's there to justify mainly societal or economical relations between people. And one of the greatest examples of this, there are many of these charter myths all around the world, and it's easy to find them. But one of the most interesting ones, at least in my perspective, is that of a Chinese origin myth. It's a myth about a primal goddess called Nu Gua. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, but let's just stick to that. And she is tasked with creating mankind. And she's very enthusiastic about that particular job. So she sets out to make, as is usual in mythologies around the world, if you create mankind, you're going to use some water and some earth. You have clay, and that's your material, and that's actually her material as well. And she starts out, really taking care of these nice little images that she's making, these nice little puppets. She's very careful. She's very detailed while making these little sort of puppets or idols. And every time that she creates one, she breathes the breath of life into a an idol into a puppet like that, and it comes to life and it becomes a human. But after some time, she sort of gets bored, and it doesn't go fast enough for her. So she tries something else. She has this huge jar of clay, and she has a rope with all kinds of knots on them. She puts the knotted rope into the jar, pulls it out, and sort of starts waving around with it, so that there's all kinds of mud, tiny mud splashes around, and she just breathes over them as well, and they also come to life. But as you can understand, they're pretty ugly, and they're not detailed, and well, they're sort of not very special looking. And that's a myth to explain that there's two types of people in the world. Ones that aren't that interesting and that are mostly meant to serve the other people who are the elite and who have every right to be the rulers of the land or the country or whatever, because they were meant to be more beautiful, more perfect, etc., etc. So that's a very I usually choose this myth to explain this type, the charter myth, because its meaning is so obvious. So that's one function of mythology. Another function of myth is to illustrate things, to show things, to teach, to inspire, to get your idea across, for instance. This is, I'm cheating a little bit with the picture that's shown here. Does anyone know which myth I'm talking about, or which myth this particular picture is meant to display? Yeah. It's Plato's cave. Excellent. So this is, perhaps technically speaking, not a myth, because myths are traditional tales, and this is a tale that Plato made up. So technically speaking, we should probably disqualify it as a myth, but I don't want to be that sort of exclusive today. And it is called the myth of the cave, and we can use it to demonstrate that even Plato, who, as you may know, was sort of a rational, logical thinker, wanted to create myths because he knew what their power was, and he knew that he couldn't convince everyone of his teachings through logical ways, but he knew that if he had good tales to accompany these logical reasonings, he would get the message across nonetheless. And some people would perhaps remember his teachings because of the logic and reasoning, and others would remember the tales and understand the message. I'm not going to get into what Plato's cave is about, mainly because I think you all know that. If you're interested, I can talk about this for hours. You can find me later. So this is what Plato does, because Plato lived, of course, in a world full with myths and in a world filled with people who still really believed in these myths. And he knew, to get his message across, that he had to hijack the power of the narrative, to hijack the power of the tale, in order to spread his message in a more elegant way, but also in a more efficient way.
After like thousand years of Greek today, after Plato times in ancient Greek, do you think like these kind of myth also serves as the type 1 myth that you mentioned, the justification of certain relations, or explaining how the world functions?
Well, that's a good question, because we sort of mythologists like to try to find all kinds of different functions so that we can talk about our subject matter more easily. But very often it is the case that one myth falls into several categories, and you can't just say, well, no, this is strictly a charter myth, or no, this myth has only this function. That's impossible. So yes, it is very true that, for instance, the tale about Hugos is also meant to illustrate. It's also meant to inspire in a sense. So myths cross boundaries actually all the time. Yeah. So that's mythical power that Plato understood he could use. And Plato actually wrote some 15 or so pretty interesting and pretty fascinating tales that were sort of meant to be read about side by side with his dialogues and his dialectic reasoning. Lastly is perhaps the most important one of the functions that I wanted to talk to you about, and that is the function of myth to unite peoples. What shared tales do, and myths perhaps are the prime example of this, is that they create a sense of identity for all the people who tell the myth, who believe the myth, who listen to the myth. It gives them a sense of identity, and it gives them a sense of belonging, because they do that together. They listen to the myth, they believe to the myth, they have a festival concerning the myth, whatever. That makes them a group. And there are people, and I tend to believe them, and that's one of the most important things that you can attain as a human, to belong somewhere. And telling tales together and believing in them together creates a we. And without a we, without a group where you belong, you can't survive. You cannot be a human. You can also, from a more sort of evolutionary perspective, say, as Harari says in his work *Sapiens*, that our early ancestors who were better able to create tales to make groups interact more easy and to make them feel as though they all belonged to the same group, they were more powerful. They shared a certain ideology expressed through tales, myths, very often, and so were able to destroy successfully other peoples who couldn't do that. So it's also in our genes, actually, to tell tales, because we all descend from the people who came up with myths, perhaps not in order to wipe out other people, but it was a side effect nonetheless. Okay, good. So that's my 3 functions for today. There are many other, but I'm not going to focus on them. If you want to know more about it, please ask. Because we have to talk about your hero now, Prometheus, who is, of course, best known as the bringer of light. And that in itself sounds pretty heroic and sort of morally totally unambiguous, because everyone believes the light is better than the darkness. Prometheus is a culture hero, what we call a culture hero. There are many ones in many mythologies around the world. Many peoples have a hero in their mythology who civilizes them, who brings them certain techniques or certain tools in order for them to develop themselves and to create a civilized, ordered society. So we Greeks, or we people from Delft, we have our own hero. He is Prometheus. His name, as you may know, means he who thinks beforehand. And he is the person who brings the light. And because of that, not just the light, but the fire, of course, as well, he creates the opportunity for people to develop all kinds of techniques that depend on fire and heat. So that's why he is so famous here, I guess. As Nienke already said, this is sort of a straightforward tale. We all know Prometheus stole the fire from the heavens in order to help the humans. So he's a great hero, and he really loves us. So we should all as you all do, of course, worship him. That's fine, and I totally agree with that, because everyone can use myths as they see fit. That's how myths are used. You have a tale which you can believe in, so that it gives you a sense of identity, of purpose, of belonging. That's fine. But if you're interested in how the actual tale goes, I can tell you. The actual tale about Prometheus is far more complicated than the one that I just told you. It's a longer story that deals with power and deceit. It all begins when the Greek supreme god, who's called Zeus, as you may know, takes over the power over the cosmos from his predecessor, a god called Kronos. You may have heard of him. And when he does that, he wants to sort of renegotiate and reorder society. Previously, when Kronos ruled, it was normal for human beings to be together with the gods. They ate together, for instance. They talked together. They existed side by side. But Zeus wants to end that particular society, and he wants people to express their inferiority to the gods. So he says that people should start making sacrifices. No one really knows how to do that. So he's asking Prometheus to help him to figure out how you should do a sacrifice. And Prometheus, being this human friend, wants to get some kind of better deal for the humans because of this. And he tries to deceive Zeus. He slaughters a sacrificial animal, and he divides what he has into two parts. One part is, it consists of all the useless stuff of an animal, all the bones. But he sort of rearranges it, he puts it on the table, and he arranged it so that it looks very attractive, because he pours over over these bones, he pours some very delicious looking fat. You may now think, well, that doesn't sound that delicious to me or so attractive to me, but in the Greek mind, fat is the best there is. So if you have these bones and you cover them in fat, it looks very good. On the other hand of the table, he puts all the edible parts of the animals, all the valuable parts, you might say, and he puts them in the stomach of the sacrificial animal, an oxen, by the way. And it looks very, well, ugly and uninteresting. And then he says he tells Zeus, "You pick now." And this is what we call an etiological myth. It explains to us, that's also a function, I didn't talk about it earlier, it explains to us a particular aspect of the world we live in by saying how it originated. So this is the origin of the sacrifice. It's the first sacrifice, and Zeus can now say how it goes. And he picks wrongly, because he is deceived by Prometheus. Some other sources say he allows himself to be deceived, but that makes it very complicated, and I'm not going to talk about it now, because you're not ready for that. So he is deceived, and he picks the wrong bundle of stuff. And you understand, of course, that he's outraged because of it, because now every time the humans are going to make sacrifice to the gods only get these bones. And you can light them up, and there's some smoke and fire, but that's not really that interesting. But that's what they will get. And the humans, whenever there's sacrifice, they will get all the edible parts, and they will burn the edible parts on the altar and be happy because they have some kind of feast. So that's what Prometheus has done for us. I'm also noticing that I'm somewhat slower, and I may use some more time if that's okay with you. If you all get bored, it's also fine. Just let me know. I can speed up stuff, or I can just stop talking altogether. So that's the first move. If you want to know, okay, how complicated is this going to be? There's only 4 moves. But for a mythological tale, that's very complicated, and it's really a lot. So what's next? After Prometheus deceives Zeus, Zeus is outraged. And he takes countermeasures. What is he doing? He withholds the fire. That's his move, his second move. You can see him there holding his lightning bolt, the one instrument he's famous for, of course. But it's also, it's not just, for blasting enemies. Of course, it's for blasting enemies. It's a very good tool for that. But it's also for sending fire to people. Our early ancestors' only way of getting fire was waiting for lightning to strike something that would burn. And then you had fire for some time. You had to take really good care of it because you could lose it if you weren't paying attention. So Zeus is stopping that now, and he's not sending us his fire anymore. And this is also, of course, you may understand, precisely to invalidate and frustrate the gift that Prometheus tried to give us. Because if we don't have fire anymore, the innards of the animal, the edible parts of the animal, are not useful for us either anymore, because we can't cook them. So this is a really sort of nasty action by Zeus in order to get his revenge on Prometheus and maybe also on us. So what's next? You know what's next, because this is the master move of Prometheus. He steals the fire. This is what he's known for. This is what he's famous for. This is why you all love him so much. And it's interesting that our earliest tale, our earliest version of the tale, it's pretty old. It goes back to about 700 BC or so. And the person narrating this story for the first time, as far as we know, is a guy called Hesiod, a poet from Greece. And he tells us all kinds of interesting particulars about this theft. He says, for instance, that Prometheus used a fennel stalk to steal the fire. I don't know if you know what that is, but that's part of a plant, a fennel, which is hard on the outside and soft on the inside, so that you can actually sort of get fire in there, and it will smolder the inside of the plant, and you can carry it around. And then you will have fire with you all the time. And there's actually a theory, I don't know if it's true, because that's not really my field of expertise, but that our early ancestors used this particular type of plant to move fire around when they moved to a new area of the country. Okay, so this, you could say, is where your hero Prometheus allows for the beginning of the glorious development of humankind. Because now we have fire and we have everything. So this is probably where the story would end. Except it doesn't, as I already predicted to you, because there's 4 parts in this tale. Because Zeus has a counter move again. After Prometheus steals the fire, Zeus counters by something weird. He creates a gift and wants to give it to mankind. And now there's this sort of problem, because Prometheus, at this point, is sort of away from the house. We don't know why, but he's on some kind of errand, and his brother is at home. His brother's name is Epimetheus. Epimetheus means he who thinks after. They're sort of weird twins, these Prometheus and Epimetheus. And Epimetheus means he who thinks afterwards, after the fact, something like that. And Prometheus tried to instruct his brother, saying you should not accept anything coming from Mount Olympus. But Epimetheus is not really good, with looking ahead. So he just gets this wonderful, beautiful gift and instantly accepts it. And what is this gift? It is Pandora. This is a pretty difficult part of the tale because it's also a pretty sort of misogynistic part of the tale. The Greeks were really good at misogyny. And what the gift of Zeus is in fact just not a certain woman, but just womankind in general. And he gives womankind to people in the form of the first woman called Pandora. You all know her because of the box. So this is also the part of the story where we sort of usually realize that apparently then humankind consisted of men only before this moment, and that's true. So there were only men, and then there is this wonderful creature that Zeus created just to fool us and to trick us, and he gave that to us humans. I will come to you very soon. And he here tells about it a great deal. And he says that it is in fact a beautiful evil. It's better in Greek. It's kalon kakon. For us to hold close and embrace. And that's exactly what happens with Prometheus. When he sees this beautiful creature, he immediately accepts it. And then there's this problem, but I will get to that later. First, your question.
The idea is that there were only men on Earth, but there were goddesses, right? So there were female goddesses, but just no female people, basically.
That's absolutely correct what you're saying. So that's a weird thing. But it is apparently true what you're saying. So there were goddesses, so there were female human-like people or something like that. And there were, of course, male gods, but there were no women yet. And we learn, actually, in Hesiod's writings, that when they create Pandora, they try to model her after the goddesses. So they weren't there yet, but they were used as but these goddesses were used as model. So you know, of course, that this Pandora is mainly problematic. Well, she's problematic for many reasons. One reason for the Greeks was just purely because she was a woman. That was already a problem. But she also came with a box, so to speak. Actually, it's not a box. It's everybody always says Pandora's box, but it's not a box. We call it the doos van Pandora in Dutch because there is the very famous Dutch humanist called Erasmus who translated the tale, but he mistranslated the word for the thing that she brought with her. So everyone always calls it Pandora's box, but she actually came with a jar. Not that it's really really different, but I'm just giving you this so you can, you know, at parties you can brag a bit. If someone makes that mistake, you can just easily cut them off and say, well, it's actually a jar. Or something like that. So what's in them? What kind of stuff is in the jar that she brings and that she actually opens upon her arrival on Earth? All kinds of really tricky things that people apparently didn't have before. These men, namely labor, disease, old age, and death, which also, in a mythological kind of way, makes sense. Because if you only had men, you can't really have people dying, because how would you get new ones? So you don't want to have all these kind of stuff because you have this very static society without women, and you can't have disease and old age and death there because it would, well, you create some kind of problem. Funnily enough, there's also hope in the jar. That's really weird, and people from sort of my field have become sort of pretty desperate about explaining why hope is in there in the jar with all these terrible evils. But never mind. If you want to know more about it, come see me later. So, is this then the end? You know, of course. The title of this slide, I said, what's in the box, or what does civilization bring us? Because apparently, this is one of the consequences of Prometheus bringing us fire. You may now think that I'm saying things that can easily be rejected or attacked or whatever, and I'm totally fine with that, because I'm just trying to give you some ideas of what the myth might tell us. Just to finish up things, and then I'm also going to wrap up. What happens to Prometheus? You may think, well, Zeus' anger now must have subsided because he's punished the people now for Prometheus' theft of the fire, but apparently he also wanted to punish Prometheus for it, and he bound him, he shackled him to a mountain somewhere in the south of Russia, and that wasn't enough either. He sent an eagle or a vulture to Prometheus every day to eat out his liver almost completely, and then the evil creature flew away again, and during the day and night the liver would regrow completely, so that next day the beast could continue his torture. This is awful, and we don't really know how long this punishment persisted, but in the end, happily, there is someone who comes to save Prometheus from his evil plight, and that's the biggest, greatest hero of the Greeks, namely Heracles, or Hercules is his Latinized name, and he kills the eagle or the vulture, and he sets Prometheus free, but he does so with the explicit okay of Zeus, who punished Prometheus in the first place. So apparently Zeus also thinks the punishment of Prometheus has reached its end, and it's okay now. Good. This is sort of the full version of the Prometheus tale. I hope you could follow me. And if there's anything that's unclear, please ask me at any time during the workshop. Shall I give the microphone back to you? Okay, good. There you are.
You can still stay if you want. Is there anyone who would like to ask a question after this talk?
Apart when Prometheus is actually a god from the old ages than Zeus, so his purpose of helping human could also be the reason of actually antagonizing Zeus instead of actually helping human, which makes the whole story a bit more ironic in this perspective. So
you're totally right. Prometheus is a god, and he's actually a titan. So that means he's older than Zeus, and it could be that he is just cross about Zeus being the new chief of the universe, and tries to antagonize him. That's you're absolutely right about that. But we also have some sources from antiquity. They're later than Hesiod, whom I talked about just now, who say that Prometheus was tasked with creating humans. We don't really know when that happened. It's a very difficult. Mythological chronology is always a real pain. But there are sources who say that Prometheus created mankind, and that would explain his love for us. He also, by the way, used the clay method, as Nugua did. Yeah.
like from this perspective of Prometheus antagonizing Zeus, does it also represent a classical story even in that time that a small society is being influenced by two big ones that's adjacent to it, and the help they give is not really help but brings in chaos and etc. You know.
It's very interesting that you mentioned that, and there's always people who try to explain myth by pointing to sort of common human behavior and common human circumstances. For instance, in another category, you have this tale about Zeus becoming the new boss, becoming the new chief after he destroyed Kronos, or not destroyed, but deposed Kronos. Kronos actually dethroned his father as well, and this sort of dynastical struggle is something that we very often see in all kinds of mythologies, of course, because many societies that told myths were patriarchies, where it would be normal and common to have tension between fathers and sons. And it would also be normal for these very common and understandable tensions to find their way in myths on a grander scale. So what your mode of sort of making sense of this myth is a very good one, I think. No. Anyone else with questions?
So I'm curious why you think a place like the University of Delft would choose this myth for its symbol. And what is the effect of it? Because you've told us the whole story, but it's pretty messed up.
If you see the story in an entire context, it's very sort of ambiguous. And that's not really what you want for a hero, to be ambiguous or to rally around a particular hero. But as I just briefly said earlier, myths are molded all the time. So you can, as a university, just focus on one particular aspect of a story and say, well, that's something that we find interesting, and we can turn that guy into our hero, and we can really rally about around that cause or something like that. But it very often happens, not just in mythology, but I guess in life, that if you know more about a certain subject, it becomes more ambiguous and more nuanced. And especially in mythology, it's very difficult, really very difficult, to pick a hero who is not contaminated by anything. I have friends, for instance, who gave their children names from mythological heroes, and you kind of understand what they're trying to do, but they all die horribly in their tales. So it's pretty difficult to find something that's absolutely, from all perspectives, unambiguous. And I don't know what the people from who founded this university thought, but it's an easy guess to say that they believed in all the good that technology could bring, and thought that Prometheus was in fact a lover of humankind and wanted to help them through the power of fire and everything good that comes from fire. That's my guess.
Thank you all. Are you now ready to make your own version, make your own story? We just heard that you can mess around with stories, with characters, that there's a lot to tell and a lot to not tell. So the rest of this workshop, we're going to do that. You're already sitting at the table in a nice group. That's your myth-making group for today. And to help you around, we provided a storyboard. I will just hold it up. You already saw it probably. This is where you can make your own myth. You can create characters, you can create locations, you can make heroes, you can make beasts, anything. And we provided also a little instruction that you can look at if you really don't know what to start. What I would like to just leave you free to do whatever, but really think of what does your myth explain, what is it about, and also try to reflect a bit on what does it tell and what does it not tell, because we're going to talk about that in the end as well. There's soon some pizza coming here, so we'll have a little break for that. But for now, I would just say, go crazy, and we will walk around to help you a bit if you are stuck or want to ask something. So have fun.